Mm-hmm.
Now, nothing to be afraid of.
So when speaking of ass kicking, as I said, when you were kicking WWE's ass for 83 weeks, and then there was that monumental shift in the ratings. What do you? I mean, there's obviously, as I said, I mean, it's been back and forth over the years, and as I said, I would rather hear it from the man that I know is going to tell the truth. Many people blame it on the situation of telling Mick Foley winning the world title. Some people say, it was the result of the Finger of Doom storyline. What do you feel that was the moment that you realized, as not only just in a sense as business, but as a company, that, wait a minute, we're in a little bit of trouble here and we may have made some errors here?
Probably August of 1998.
Okay.
When I got called into a meeting with a bunch of executives I've never even heard of before, and they all sat me down and told me how I was going to produce wrestling. And I at that time in 1998, we were still kicking WWE's ass. We were still making record profit, record revenues. Things were going our way. We were dominating the ratings. And now I'm sitting at a table of about 12 or 15 people that knew nothing about my product, that knew nothing about the wrestling audience, that knew nothing about the history of WCW and WWE.
Mm-hmm.
And they proceeded to tell me how I was going to go about producing my show going forward. And at that point, I went, okay, I didn't realize how big of a challenge it was going to be in August of 98.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember going home to my wife going, this isn't good. Because prior to that meeting, I had full autonomy.
Okay.
I mean, I had nobody breathing down my back. I had no executives above me telling me how or why to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had to obviously operate within certain corporate parameters and a certain way of doing business. I had to run my business like a business. But when it came to creative and strategy, I had nobody breathing down my back. There was no reason for them to breathe down my back.
Mm-hmm.
I took WCW from a $24 million a year company losing $10 million a year to a $300 million a year company spinning off about $50 million.
Okay.
So why would anybody try to tell me to do it differently? And they didn't until August of 98. And that's when I went, this isn't right. And then it got progressively worse throughout the end of 98, and it started getting really bad in 99. So for wrestling fans in the dirt sheet universe and
the Dave Meltzers,
they're looking for a moment on television that represented a pivot point.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't it. It was a much bigger, more powerful effect that had everything to do with the corporate perspective of WCW and what actually worked.
So whose decision that night when Mick Foley won the title, whose decision was it to give away that situation?
That was mine.
Okay.
That was all mine. Now, keep in mind, and people can be critical of that. They go, Eric, it backfired. Keep in mind, I was the guy that was giving away WWE finishes before their show even went on the air. I started my show 3 minutes before theirs so I could give away their finishes so viewers wouldn't tune into them. Guess what? That worked.
Mm-hmm.
I was the guy that was calling out Vince McMahon, challenged him to a fight. Everybody said, you should never do that. It's not done in wrestling. You should never do it. Guess what? It worked. There's a lot of things that I did that everybody told me wouldn't work and I shouldn't do it, and they worked. So when the idea came along to give away the finish to the Mick Foley Rock match, I was like, man, let's just try it, see what happens. And it didn't work. It backfired.
And it kept me unemployed for another 2 years. So trust me. I'm like
10-1 at that point. All right, I'm 10-1.
Mm-hmm.
I lost one. All right, so I lost one. But that type of controversial move, those shenanigans, are what got us to the dance in the first place.
Mm-hmm. But do you feel like, when you, obviously, as I said, the business has changed so much from then to now. And, the one big thing that, wrestling fans per se, and just, I know from a producer standpoint where it's hard to, I guess you would say, control the asylum when you have all these different egos that you have, obviously, that you have to take on as a president, and also being per se as a performer, how did you maintain, because obviously, now like people feel that, whether it's the executives have too much control or creative has too much control and not letting wrestlers have input in their storylines and in their characters as much as they did in the 90s. Do you feel in your situation, two-part question, A, how did you manage and juggle all those egos and being able to still make sure that you executed what you wanted to execute, that you felt your vision was right? And second, compared to how it is now, do you feel that creative or an executive like yourself should have the final say? Or do you feel that with the way AEW does stuff compared to WWE now, which is a more controlled environment, what do you feel is the more positive outcome in the sense for everybody all around, that you're getting not only the best product, but also giving people that freedom to be able to trust that they can do what they're meant to do?
Yeah, it has to. I think it has to be a balance and a combination. Right? As a writer or a director or a producer, you have an idea, you have a vision, you have a script, right? But it's still about human beings performing.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike acting, unlike movies or television, wrestling is a little different because you're not dealing with trained actors or actresses. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You're dealing with wrestlers. And some wrestlers are better actors and actresses than others. And some wrestlers, even today, have a much more creative mind than other performers do. So for me, I think the balance, if I were to do it all over again, which I wouldn't do, but if I were to do it all over again, certainly you're always going to have that talent that you want to collaborate with because their ideas are great. And you want to take those great ideas and weave them into your broader vision to achieve the best possible outcome. You have some talent that really wants to have that input, but just doesn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And or just doesn't have enough to make a positive difference. So you just have to balance that and nurture the ones that are really great and give them the latitude to contribute and collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
And also nurture those who don't have that skill, because it's a skill. In some cases, you're born with it. In some cases, you develop it.
Mm-hmm.
But, that talent that's young and hungry and wants to have a lot of input, you have to manage that, nurture that, and help them understand, why their particular ideas might not be the best idea right now. You never criticize an idea. You criticize the timing of an idea. Mm-hmm. So nobody takes it personally, but it's a balance. I think one of the things that's hurting WWE, I think, in terms of its potential to continue to grow the audience, is it's pretty much of a cookie cutter formula.
Yeah.
And it starts at the top. Vince McMahon has a very, very specific way that he sees things. Mm-hmm. And he's not real open. Now, he can be. You can convince him, but you got to work your ass off to do it. And you got to fight, and you got to dig. And it's possible, but it's hard. Mm-hmm. I think in today's environment, I would, if I was back in that spot, I'd be looking for those people who I believed saw the bigger picture and collaborate as much as I can and nurture those who are on their way to getting to that point.
Well, when you obviously, you shocked the world and you shocked the industry when you came back into the fold, as a performer with WWE, where you have a situation I think the world never saw coming of two rival, people that legitimately probably hated each other at a certain degree in those times, to eventually end up working for the company. Was that something that you ever saw happening?
No.
Happening?
No, I remember when Kevin Nash called me in 2002. He called me. He said, "Hey, I'm not supposed to know this, and I'm certainly not supposed to tell you this, but don't be surprised if you get a call from Vince McMahon." that's not going to happen. But cool, thanks, Kevin. And sure enough, 2 days later, Vince called me, and it took me about a minute and a half or 2 minutes in my mind to go, this will be cool. Because I didn't hate Vince. That's another narrative thing, And of course, I perpetuated it by some of the things I did and said. But I had no personal feeling about Vince one way or the other. As a competitor, he was number one. I was a distant number two. I wanted to close that gap, and I got aggressive about doing that. And wrestling, just the industry being what the industry is, I had to do it in kind of an over-the-top fashion. I was loud and aggressive about it. But it wasn't because I disliked Vince. I didn't know Vince. I didn't have any idea what he was like, whether I'd like him or dislike him. So once that was all over and WCW was now a part of WWE, there was no animosity. And when Vince called me, it was like, damn, this will be fun. Do this.
So like when you, I mean, obviously, as I said, bouncing from, WCW as the guy, and then working for TNA, and then working for Impact, and then slowly, in a sense, number one, obviously now, the emergence of AEW, and you've been over there per se, number one, to do some guest spots. What do you feel between all the companies and all your years of experience just in wrestling and just in the business? What do you feel the takeaway, the differences between all the companies that you've been a part of?
Vision. Vince McMahon had a vision early on. When Vince McMahon decided to take wrestling out of the smoke-filled arenas and the little studios and, increase the production values and bring in the celebrities and WrestleMania and being more of a mainstream entertainment property, that was vision that nobody else had at that point. Or if they had it, they didn't have the balls to pursue it. Vince did. And to this day, I mean, WWE is a $4.5 or $5 billion publicly held company with a global footprint. That's a result of vision. TNA didn't have a vision. TNA just wanted to be in the wrestling business. It was a vanity project, is what it really was.
Okay.
Truth be known, that's what it was. And I feel like AEW is in some respects, not in all respects, but in some respects, a vanity project. And I don't see the vision, and look, they're doing really well in many respects. Live attendance for, they have 4 or 5 big shows a year. They do well with those. Congratulations. That's not an easy thing to achieve. Much respect. But the television product is flat.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not growing. It's flat. It's not compelling. They have a certain audience. They have that indie dirt sheet internet wrestling audience. They dominate that dirt sheet internet wrestling audience. But I'm not seeing anything to suggest to me that they have a vision or plan to expand beyond that. And it's reflective in the ratings.
See, this is the thing. Like when people, I mean, many people have tried to criticize you and say, and not just you, but other people who have been in the game for a long time, and you'll get the dirt sheets, or you get the marks that will say that you're out of touch, or this is not the way things are done, or you don't know what thing you're talking about because you're responsible for bombing a company and making it go under. But what I believe in the sense, number one, is that when I listen to you and I listen to the feedback that you give, I truly believe that it is in a way where it's not coming from a place of hate. It's coming from a place of experience, because you've had the highs and you've had the lows, and exactly per se the mistakes, because obviously we, as you say, we can't go back. We can't go back and change the past, but you can limit the mistakes. And as I said, when people really have to take a look of what you have done, not only, as I said, for the business, but just for entertainment as a whole, because in reality, I mean, people can say what they want. This is my opinion, and I believe it. It's a lot of people's opinion too, as well, that when you used to pitch those promos of, like, if there wasn't there wouldn't be a Mr. McMahon if there wasn't, you know, an Eric Bischoff, because you were the first real heel in the sense of a boss figure on television. When you look at in the sense of the people that you, to me, like when they were in WWF before it became WWE, you really only had one guy. You had Hulk Hogan. He was the guy that was carrying the flagship. And then you maybe had, of course, you know, Randy Savage and Steamboat, but they were always sort of considered in a mid-level level where you had Hogan as just being the one guy. And then you bring, I guess, the guys, as I said, who were not mid-level, but as I said, in that, you know, number 2 or 3 spot, brought them and gave them opportunities in WCW to not just be, you know, the guy, but it was a thing what I loved about your vision. And this is why I always say, I'm like, when people actually really look at what you did, not about the faults, not about, because I think people spend more time focusing on that last year where it's Eric's fault and it's this and that. But if you really look at what you did in the industry, in the business of giving people opportunities to either sink or swim, because you said when you got dropped this bomb of Monday night going head to head, it was sink or swim. And you had to make executive decisions on the fly that was not only best for the product, best for Ted Turner, but best for the business and moving forward. So when I look at, you know, the criticism sometimes that, whether it be that you get, I don't feel that it's warranted in the way that it's malicious. And I know, obviously, you know, when there was a lot of heat that you took with the whole, you know, saying of CM Punk's situation was a complete bomb, you know.
It is a bomb. It's a fact. Look at the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making this shit up. I got nothing against CM Punk. I don't know CM Punk. I've never spoken a word. We've never shaken hands. I have zero personal feelings about CM Punk.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason I jumped on him is because he got mouthy. He came out and said, you know, put himself over and saying that he and a couple of the other guys coming to AEW was a bigger deal than Scott Hall and Kevin Nash.
Sure.
Well, that's some stupid shit.
Mm-hmm.
Don't say that. You know, unless you're absolutely sure you're going to back it up, and he didn't back it up. Look, CM Punk came out. He'd been off for 7 years. Sure, there was a lot of built-up enthusiasm, excitement, because he was over, you know, in WWE. So of course people are going to, you know, pick up where they left off, right? Oh man, this is going to be great. It's going to be great. He came out. You know, I think he showed up on Rampage. It did a little over 1 million viewers. The next week they were back down to 400. Well, what happened to those 600,000 people that showed up? They went, okay, cool, and they didn't come back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you look at, you know, Dynamite's ratings, all of the big surprises and bringing in all these WWE guys. The funny thing about Tony Khan is he, you know, it's the other thing that got me a little bit irritated with Tony is he came out and said, well, you know, we're just not going to make the same mistakes WCW made. Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've made some mistakes in WCW, and he's making those mistakes and multiplying them by 4. You know, dumping all that, bringing in all that WWE talent, making a big deal out of them, paying all the money that he's paying them.
Mm-hmm.
Then they show up, they make their surprise appearance. It's not really a surprise.
I was going to say that point.
And then they go away, and you don't hear from them again.
Mm-hmm. But this is the thing.
A lot of that young talent, a lot of that talent that they started with, they're getting pushed